What up, fam? Welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. Okay, so I have a little bit of bad news, a little bit of a monkey wrench thrown in my plans today. Today's episode was supposed to be a collaboration between myself and Caleb over at CWLBuilds. He's a fantastic maker here on YouTube, and I was super jazzed to do this collaboration where he was gonna make a lightsaber and I was gonna make this kind of badass Western style holster for it. Unfortunately, I haven't received it yet. I don't know what happened. I thought it would be here by now, but it isn't. So yeah, that's kind of a bummer, but what we can probably do for now is just...
One more thing,
Wait,
I guess speaking of
you guys hear
Skill Tree, I have to send this to him, so...
What is that? Oh, what is that? Stop, stop. How are you doing this right now?
You ready?
Whoa.
Here you go.
What are you doing? What the f... Okay. I'm alright. I'm gonna unpack how I feel about that unspeakable horror that just happened to me, later. I'll do that later. For now, check out this dope lightsaber! Caleb did an amazing job with this. It's super, like, sturdily built. It looks like it's been through many a battle with Sith Lords. And I especially like this little clicky button. You hear? Here. It's such a satisfying little on-off button. It's the little things. I love that. This thing is great. My task is clear. I must make an epic holster worthy of such a glorious weapon. Now I'm gonna be making this sucker out of leather, and before we start, if you're new to leatherworking, I'm gonna put a playlist up here that has all of my leather crafting videos so far. Kind of the nature of the show is we go step by step, kind of leveling up skills as we go, so I'm probably gonna glance over a lot of stuff here that I cover in a lot more details in those videos. And since my video catalog is getting kind of long, as I go, I'm gonna add the videos that have the skills that I'm talking about kind of up here as we move along. Trying to make this whole process as easy as possible for you if you're just starting out. All right, so we have a lot to do here. So let's just jump into this thing and level up this skill. Getting started. To get this ball rolling, I need to solidify first exactly what I want to do for a design here. I have in my head of this kind of having a Western meets Jedi feel to the whole thing. And after some Pinterest searches for inspiration and some doodling, I landed on this thigh holster design. It's held together by a couple of metal rings, and to me has kind of a feel of like an outlaw look to it, which I really dig. I've been watching a lot of The Mandalorian, so that might have something to do with it. With that nailed down, let's get our template together. I started by tracing the lightsaber on some paper and finding its center. So a good trick here for getting your templates to be perfectly symmetrical is to draw out only half of the image. Once you have that half exactly how you want it, you fold it over and then you cut it all out like how I used to make snowflakes in school. When you open it back up, both sides are going to be exactly the same. With that in mind, I began drawing the piece of my design that would lay against my thigh. Now, since I made this design with built-in straps, I need to make sure those straps are the right width to fit into the buckles that I bought for it. Once the drawing was complete, I folded the paper down my center line and cut the shape out. Then I went ahead and double-checked that it fit exactly how I wanted it to. Now that's really the only bit I think I need a template for right now. I have an idea how I'm gonna make kind of a holster design to fit over the top of this, but I don't think I need the template yet. I'll get to that pretty soon. For now though, let's move on to prepping the leather. So for this project, I'm using some beautiful 9-ounce veg tan leather. I trace my template onto the leather and extend one of the lower straps to ensure I have enough to fit around my meaty thigh. Then I carefully cut the whole thing out. Now to get the measurements for the top bit I talked about to hold the whole thing in place, I put it into position and then started forming some aluminum foil all around it. Once satisfied with that, I drew out all of my lines. Those lines are then transferred onto a paper template, which is checked for fit. Happy with that, I transferred it onto my leather and cut the whole thing out. Now I'm gonna need this piece to be shaped around the lightsaber just like the tinfoil was. To do this, I first wrapped my backing piece in plastic to protect it. I also did the same to the lightsaber and positioned it how I wanted it in that space. Then I placed the front piece in warm water, making sure it soaked all the way through. Positioning the wet leather where I needed it, I began to form it around the lightsaber to ensure a tight, custom fit. I also shaped the area that the button touched to make sort of a soft cradle for it as a natural stopping point for the lightsaber. Now with that all set, I need it to dry for like 8 hours. This is called wet forming. That leather is going to dry into that shape and it's going to stay that way. No worries though, there is plenty to do. While that dries, we're going to go ahead and cut out some of the rest of our pieces. Now my design calls for like a belt strap of 1.5 inches wide. Unfortunately, all my local Tandys had was this 3-inch wide strap. But I'm going to call this fortunate, fam, because it introduced me to my new favorite leather tool. Behold, the strap cutter. I love this thing. I honestly don't know how I lived this long without it. It is such a clutch tool. All you do to use it is set both sides to the thickness of your leather and adjust the arm, which has little measurements on the side, to whatever width you need. Now simply pass the leather through the arm and Robert, your father's brother, the strap is cut exactly to your specification. I got this bad boy for like $20, and for the amount of time it saves me, I would gladly pay 3 times that amount. This thing is gold. All right, I'll stop like waxing about it, but seriously, you gotta pick one of these things up. They're dope. Anyways, next I need to come up with a way for all of my belts and straps to connect to my rings here. I ended up drawing out this 6-inch long paper template in a shape that I thought was interesting. Then I cut it out of a 1-inch wide strip of leather to form this little connection loop when it's bent around the ring in one of the belt straps. Being happy with that design, I went ahead and made 5 more of them. By the time I had all that worked out, my top holster piece was dried into shape and looking slick. And the lightsaber fit perfectly in it. Honestly, I'm really excited about that, like the fact that it was measured out correctly and everything just kind of fit and looked really good together. That was very satisfying for me. That being said, if you aren't sure here that everything's gonna work out perfectly like that, it's okay to make it a little bit longer, mold it into shape, and then just cut it to be exactly the shape you need it to be. Now, real quick note, as I'm going, I'm treating all the edges with my edge beveler and then going back and slicking everything. I just want to get that out of the way because if I don't show it, somebody inevitably in the comment section is like, bro, you should edge bevel always and make sure you're slicking it. It's all set. I got it. Also, they're right. You really should be treating your edges every time you do this. So just make sure you're always kind of making it look rounded and nice and slicking them off. It makes a huge difference when you get those little details right. Also, doing all that stuff right now while everything is disassembled is going to be leaps and bounds easier than trying to do it once everything's put together. For a little bit of a design element, I'm running my groover tool around the thigh piece just for looks. I'm also going to add it on the front of the holster to provide a stitch line around the edge and also close to the lightsaber to keep the leather nice and snug around it. Because I'm afraid without that stitching, it's going to slowly kind of move away, and I don't want this thing to be sitting loose in there. I want it to stay snug. Using those lines as my guide, I began punching my holes through both pieces of leather. Now, because I have 2 of these 4-hole punches and a really soft cutting board, I developed a sneaky little trick to keep everything lined up as I go. By leaving the first punch in place, I was able to ensure the 2 pieces stayed locked together in the exact position I needed them to be in. I also used a spring clamp on the longer side close to the bottom just to help keep everything straight. The end result was the 2 pieces of my holster with perfectly matching holes. So at this point, most of the pieces are cut to shape, the main pieces are ready to be sewn together, everything is looking pretty tight. But we also have to go ahead and prep all the belt parts so that the hardware and the buckles can be added in. So we're gonna need to add those buckles to the top straps here, as well as to this thigh strap. To do that, assess where the buckle is going to sit, and then fold the leather back on itself in that spot. Keep in mind you want to add enough leather that when you fold it over, you have enough room to add rivets to hold everything in place. I marked the center of my fold and punched a hole a 1/2 inch away from the mark on either side. Then I carefully cut the space between them, leaving a 1-inch long space. This space gives the belt keeper enough freedom to open and close easily. I did the same procedure with all the rest of my straps. Then I placed my belt holes in that thigh strap 1/2 inch apart from each other just to allow for extra sizing. And with that, the holster bit is all prepped and ready to go. That part is done. So now let's move on to the belt part. So I'm looking to have a ring on the front and a ring on the back to serve as a connection point for all the belt parts and for the actual holster itself. And also a main buckle on the side just to be able to like adjust the belt as I need it. With that in mind, I took that 1.5 inch strip I cut and positioned it around me, marking where it met the center of my back. Then I cut it 1 inch shorter to account for the width of the ring, and added a taper to the ends just for a more finished look. Next, I did the same thing, this time coming from the mid-back, and assessing where I wanted my main buckle to land on my hip. I marked that 3 inches longer just to account for it folding around the buckle's keeper. Finally, I assessed the length of the adjustment part of my belt, starting from the center of my waist and leaving a little bit of extra space to allow for the inevitable expansion of my gut. Then I cut it into shape and punched holes every ½ inch. At this point, I realized I forgot one thing. I need 2 more little straps to attach the holster to the rings. These are just simple 8-inch long, 1-inch wide straps with holes punched every ½ inch along its length. Also, while testing out my little connection loops that I was making, I realized they were way too fat around the middle to allow for much movement around the ring. To fix this, I just took them and cut some space in the middles. This allows for plenty of room and honestly looks a lot cooler. I also decided to run the groove around the edge of these just because I thought it added a little pizzazz. That's right, a jazz hand. Deal with it. And with those little adjustments made, the prep phase is finally done. I know that was like a lot of sub-steps within the major prepping step, but honestly, having the prep take that much time is gonna make all the rest of it go by way quicker. And with that being done, we can move on to dyeing. To make up for the length of that last step, this step is super simple. I just applied 2 coats of the Pro Dye Saddle Tan to all of my pieces with a rag, both front and back. Then I went back over everything with a Gel Antique Saddle Tan to add an extra depth of color and make all of the edge work pop. And this, fam, this is where I learned a valuable lesson in the way that valuable lessons tend to be learned, by getting beaten over the head with it. So it was roughly midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning-ish when I'm doing this step, and I'm delirious at this point. So I reach over and I grab the Saddle Tan. Put it on the biggest piece, because of course, why not start on the biggest piece, and rubbed it in, and quickly realized that it was not Saddle Tan, it was in fact dark brown, and I wanted to scream. This is not Saddle Tan, yo. That is not the color I was going for at all. I was so upset. So upset. So then in there, I replicated the piece. So the piece that you see for the rest of this video is the second one that was hastily made at 1 o'clock in the morning. Luckily, I had this one to use as a template, but moral of the story, yo, read your labels. Stupid. Anyways, next I added some leather balm to each piece and gave it a few minutes to dry before buffing it to a glossy shine. This little bit of extra shine makes a giant difference, makes this thing look so nice. For the last little added touch, I busted out some gum tragacanth, wiping it along my edges with a sponge brush, and using the slicker to get those edges glossy smooth. Paying attention to these little tiny details is what makes the difference between something kind of looking like you're just getting started and looking more professional. Not to say like the things I make are super professional, because I'm still really new at learning. I'm sure some of you pro leather workers look at my work and are like, sweet. But like little things like that really stand out, and I notice them now when I go and I buy leather things. If an edge isn't finished, if I'm at like a Ren fair or something and I notice that somebody kind of slacked in those details, they stand out to me like sirens. It's just like, you didn't put that little extra care into it that would have made this just perfect. And even though it's not all together, look at all these pieces. They look amazing. I'm loving the shine and the depth of the color. And though all of these pieces are beautiful separate, we're gonna bring these suckers together and move on to putting it all together. Starting with my holster pieces, I'm opting to use a basic saddle stitch to marry the two together. Mostly because it's the stitch I have most practice with, and it's honestly the strongest stitch I know. That being said, I do believe for this application, it is the correct stitch. I don't want you to think I'm just saying it like, it's all I know, so it's what I'm gonna use. It is a super strong stitch. And again, like I said, if you're new to leatherworking, should be up here somewhere, the link to the video in which I cover in more detail how to saddle stitch. And once that's all done, I am over the moon with how sexy these two pieces look together and how perfectly that lightsaber fits. It's almost like I made it specifically to fit this lightsaber. I don't know why I come across really surprised when a thing fits in the space that was made for it. Okay, so next we need to connect our belt straps to those rings. To do this, I fold my keepers in half and punch rivet holes straight through them. I put the ring in place and position the belt within the keeper to mark my hole positions. Then I punch those holes as well. Finally, I lock the whole thing into place with some rapid rivets. I then go ahead and repeat this process for each connection point to the front and the back ring. Next, I position my main belt buckle into its corresponding slot. Then I punch rivet holes to lock the whole assembly in place with my rapid rivets. There's gonna be a lot of rapid rivets in this. They're really simple to use. Again, they're in other videos, but you just kind of pound them into place and they're riveted. Nice and simple. With that locked in, our belt assembly is complete. And I love how this thing looks. And because of the design, I could technically take off that holster and put on whatever else I wanted to, like little bags of some sort or like a sword belt or something. Like, it's a cool design. I like this design a lot. Quickly moving on. Now we need to add the hardware to the holster piece. This is really more of the same here. Just position the buckles where they go and lock everything into place with the rivets. The finished product will have one buckle at the thigh and two up where it connects to the belt rings. And speaking of connecting to those belt rings, the last connections that need to be made are those adjustment straps. We use the last of those keeper loops and more rapid rivets to lock them into the bottom of our rings. So if you saw there, everything was basically just kind of folding things into place, adding a rapid rivet to it. Folding a thing in place, adding a rapid rivet to it. And that's because we took our time with the prep. Everything was measured, everything was cut and ready to go. All had to be done was sealed together. Seriously, it took me like 12 hours-ish to do the prep work. It took me about 3 to actually put the whole thing together, and most of that was in the sewing. I'm just saying, I know the prep is like boring and tedious, but take your time with it, because that's really where the project is made. But now it's time for the moment of truth, as I strap the holster into place. And bam! Check that out! It is Jedi meets Gunslinger, and I love it. And that thigh strap design has such a badass feel to it. And seriously, this lightsaber fits so snug, I could do like backflips or whatever, but it's still really easy to pull out, and it sits in there perfectly, and the little button sits where that little button fold is. Sorry, I love this thing. I'm geeking out about it. Now, a special shout out again to Caleb over at CWLBuilds. I highly recommend you going to his channel and checking out how he made this amazing lightsaber, because I'm going to. I love this thing. I'm gonna put the link to his channel in the description. Why don't you go over there, hit that sub and like button, and tell him Skilltree sent you. Now, if you liked what you saw here or found it at least mildly interesting, why don't you hit me with that thumbs up love, and also don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. Also, if there's any skill you want to see me cover, leave it in the comment section and I will add it to the list. Alright, well I should get going. I feel a disturbance in the force. That, and it's been like 16 hours and I'm hungry and tired. I'm gonna go to bed now. In the meantime, keep leveling up, you.